This evening I have a friend here with me, Benedicia, and we were talking the other day, something I guess that kind of blurs the line between anthropology and organized religion, how organized religions over time have manipulated the emotions and thoughts and symbols that people use.
Well, that depends on whether you're talking about a religion as a whole or whether you're talking about the people who are running the religion, if you will, the hierarchy that's running it. Quite often, the religion itself will manipulate people's emotions, people's symbols, for very good reasons. Religion is one of the things that keeps us all civilized. But, on the other hand, because there are people who feel the need to have an outside source to define for them their morals, their ethics, their day-to-day actions even sometimes, you run into the problem of unscrupulous people who, they know those symbols, they know what kinds of manipulations will cause what kinds of reactions in people, and they will do so with the absolute deliberate intent of taking people, turning them into a group that these individuals can then control. And that's where, unfortunately, organized religion to a certain extent has picked up a bad name, particularly in the past 20 or 30 years when we've had so much evangelism on television, for example.
The interesting phenomenon of televangelism.
Yes, and that it can be dangerous. Fortunately, those sorts of people don't generally get much of a large following, and since television is a very expensive medium, they generally don't tend to stay around very long, thank goodness.
You said they don't get much of a large following?
You have to have a large amount of money. I mean, the studio has got to cost a lot more than you or I could do out of pocket, for example.
But a lot of these televangelists almost have their own studios.
Sure they do. But it's because they are not manipulating their congregations mostly for bad ends. Most of them probably even believe what they're preaching, whether or not you and I agree with what they are preaching. So it's just simply a matter of, because we don't agree does not make them wrong.
Yeah,
It's
and
simply
we do have to remember
disagree.
that. Do you have to remember that?
Yes, but there are a few of those out there that I think it wouldn't be just a matter of you and I wouldn't agree with them. I think most people we know, and a lot of people even we don't know, wouldn't agree with these people.
Especially if they knew what was really going on.
Sure. And as a matter of fact, what we're talking about here actually is cults. This is where a lot of these little splinter religions will come from. It's not because somebody really has the Word of God handed down to them. I'm not even sure, between you and me, I'm not sure what that means. But there are people who say that God has spoken to them and that this is the way that the true followers of God should behave. And when you start getting into things like the sexual exploitation of children and that sort of thing, then you know something's wrong.
Oh yeah, those are the more extreme things.
Sure.
But somewhere real close to the line between well, there is a line between cults and between churches, and as you get closer to the line, you get cults that don't have anything obviously wrong with them, and you get churches that just seem very eccentric, shall we say, and it gets real hard to tell sometimes.
Sure.
I suppose not to dwell on it, but going back to the televangelists, the thing there that people have to keep in mind is that you mentioned that there is a dangerous situation, and I agree that when you have someone who's going over television, going into millions of people's homes and saying, just send me $5,
Sure.
That doesn't sound like much.
Until you start counting how many people send in $5.
Yes, and then
how
you've got a
often.
person who has a phenomenal amount of money, and you'd better be sure you can trust somebody. I mean, Ross Perot, in a recent presidential election, this billionaire down in Texas, and some people thought he was great, and some people thought he was too much of a wild card, and some people really didn't know. But the point being, in a sense, he wasn't really different than any televangelist. He's someone who's a lot of money, who would like to do something for this country that he believes is the right thing to do.
Sure. And he has the gift of being able to say it in such a way that when you hear it, you go, he's right. Darn.
Mm-hmm.
If he's right about that, what about the things about which I have no opinion?
Mm-hmm.
What does he think? And if they also sound good, this is where you start building followers.
Well, and where you could easily slip into a dictator sort of situation.
Sure.
And you begin to abdicate all the decisions you should be making, the thinking you should be doing for yourself.
It's
I guess I'm somewhat worried about the situation in America at the present time, because we're getting a number of, the catchword, political action committees and such. Basically, anybody who has money being able to, in a sense, buy opinions in our national government. And I hope, I trust that there are certain limits to how far our legislators would go. With some of them, that's a naive perspective. With others, I think my trust is well-founded. But the point being that it does create a very dangerous and insecure situation, because you don't know when any particular political perspective will raise enough money to essentially buy the government.
Well, you're talking about belief systems. Belief systems are not just religions. They're political beliefs, they're personal beliefs, they're moral beliefs. A belief system is that whole group of things for which you may not necessarily have any proof, but this is what you believe because it works for you. And as long as it keeps working, at least if you're an intelligent person, you will stick to that belief system. There are
Until it blows up in your face.
Right. But in the first place, there are a lot of people that even when their belief system blows up in their face again and again and again,
They'll go back to it?
it isn't that they go back to it, they won't let go of it. But because they feel not that there's something wrong with their belief system, but the fact that nobody else follows that same belief system. If everybody believed exactly as they did, their belief system would not keep blowing up in their faces.
So the problem is not me, the problem is everyone else.
Right. This is where you get a lot of these people who get very fanatical about their religion, and where if you try and have a discussion about what it is that they believe, they get very upset if you start saying that you don't agree with them. Because if you don't agree, they might hear something that they don't want to hear. They've got their belief system, they're happy with it, don't mess with it. And that's why
Even if it's not healthy.
Sure. Because that means even if it isn't healthy, if you're messing with their belief system, it means that they may have to change. And they're comfortable the way things are, at least until it blows up in their faces. But you will find these people staying within their own religion, never talking to anybody who doesn't belong to that same little tight group, because they are terrified of dealing with the rest of the world. They may have to look at things that are not comfortable. And if they've already discovered by having their belief system blow up in their face too many times that there are things out there that are challenging to them, then they're going to go climb in a hole and pull it in after them. How sad.
Yeah. In some ways, I want to be compassionate towards such people, and yet I know they're not listening, so it's like, what could I say anyway? And it's a frustrating situation where, in a very real sense, you're simply, really and truly living in different worlds. And it's intensely difficult, and sometimes I find myself wondering whether it's possible to build a bridge between the two.
It's possible, but the problem is you're stuck with you can only build the bridge so far.
Hmm.
And at some point, the bridge has to start being built from the other edge. You can't build the whole bridge because you can't go the whole way.
Hmm.
And if the people that you are trying to communicate with are refusing to do anything at all about helping build that bridge from the other side, you might as well quit wasting your time. There are other people out there.
Hmm.
I wouldn't worry about it. The only thing you really have to do sometimes with some of these people is watch your back.
Yeah.
Because some of them are so afraid of having their beliefs challenged that they won't just climb into their own little private group and stay there. Sometimes they will go as far as eliminating people who are too challenging.
Hmm.
And I think you have to admit you'd be somewhat of a challenge to certain people.
Sister Who might be the first one to go.
Duck.
I guess I was discussing something similar to this with someone recently, and how to deal with a challenging person who is very opinionated, and she has the right to her own beliefs, but not really friendly toward others because she was so opinionated. And the person I was speaking with was somewhat bitter toward this lady, and I just said, well, you have to give her the chance, an opportunity to reach out and to become something more than that. I think, and then I quickly added, you give her the benefit of the doubt, you give her a smile, you give her, supper if she needs it, but you don't give her enough rope to hang yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You don't give her the rope to hang yourself. And the same thing with these groups we're discussing. If they want a hole to crawl into and be their own little world, well, we can give them a little hole to do that.
Well,
But I don't want to be giving them any opportunity to use it as a base of operations to try to take over the world.
No, that's a separate issue.
Mm.
That's something you always have to be careful about. It's the difference between having the proper manners to realize that there are certain things that certain people do not wish to discuss. And once you've gone into it once and they say, no, I'm really uncomfortable, I don't want to talk about this with you, then you have the correct manners to avoid that subject thereafter with those particular people.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, for example, if someone were to walk in and say, there's something dreadfully wrong with you, and if you let me change your belief system and make you like me, you will no longer be like this, you will no longer be an unhappy person. Now notice they haven't asked you yet whether you're happy or not. They've simply decided that because you don't look right to them, you are an unhappy person and they can fix that.
And they guarantee that their way is happy.
Right.
We touched on televangelism. I was reminded of from an earlier discussion we had. Before there were televangelists, it seemed like the big thing was the tent meetings.
Mm-hmm. Same idea. You just have a bigger audience.
Well, a lot of times, though, in the same way, the television brings in these special effects.
Mm-hmm.
In tent meetings, you couldn't come up with video special effects, and so they tried to create other special effects.
Oh, sure.
But that's where, to me, the line gets real fuzzy, because I do believe that God really exists, and then you have this person who might have a little bit of knowledge of God, but then he's added all this showmanship to it, and it begins to get real muddled as to what's real and what's not. One obvious subject, I guess, that comes to my mind is the whole subject of physical healings.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking the other day, and you explained it, I thought, very well, as, in every situation, essentially you're trying to take energy from a higher source and bring it down to someone in need. But there's all kinds of other things that get in the way. But what we're talking about here is more the person who places themselves in the middle as the bridge between the higher source and you.
Mm-hmm. That's where personally I get a little uncomfortable,
Mhm.
because my feeling is this deity is supposed to have created everything
Mhm.
and is everywhere and knows everything. Therefore, why does anybody need an intermediary? Are they lazy? Are they ignorant? What's the problem here?
Mhm.
Okay? On the other hand, when you're looking at things like televangelism, and it works the same way,
Mhm.
because in my opinion, the mind has no limits and there is no speed.
Mhm.
It is instantaneous from mind to mind. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether you're all in a big room together or whether you're scattered all across the country if you're listening to the same person.
Mhm.
And if this person is speaking and building up and getting people excited and passionate about whatever it is that's going on, he is building up an energy field and using himself as the focus. Well, of course healing happens sometimes then.
Kind of like a quartz crystal in a radio.
Yeah, it's a focus.
Mhm.
And the tent meetings were the same way, although one of the ways that they got these people all excited and really believing that something extraordinary was going to happen was the fact that most of these tent preachers were also pretty good amateur stage magicians.
Hmm.
And it's surprising what sophisticated effects you can get from very, very simple manipulations.
Hmm.
And some of the books that I've read on early stage magic are absolutely astounding. You know, people appearing in midair, or people disappearing from an apparently solid surface.
And we're talking about when now?
Renaissance and earlier, and at that time, these effects were well known and frequently used.
So
But-
basically the 1600s?
And earlier,
1500s?
1400s, 1300s.
They're making people appear in midair.
Mm-hmm.
Like David Copperfield hasn't discovered anything.
Exactly. What he's done, personal opinion, what he's done mostly, as far as I can tell, is take the effects that have been used for hundreds of years and simply made them bigger. You know, what's the difference between making something your size disappear and the Statue of Liberty disappear, except size?
Mhm.
All he's done is found a way of applying the same illusion that would make you disappear to something much, much bigger. It may actually even be a different illusion,
Mhm.
but the idea is the same. So,
And it was nevertheless impressive, but
Yeah.
that's another subject.
but it's all a matter of, once you've impressed your audience, once you've made them believe that there is something special and extraordinary about you, then when you start saying, and if you believe, God will heal, you know, and everybody's already going, this guy really does have a connection.
And yet, there were some that I think really were honest about being servants of God for the purpose of healing
Oh,
others.
absolutely.
You know,
I'm
they
not
weren't
saying
all
that there
charlatans.
isn't-
Yeah, no, I didn't mean you were saying that. A quote that comes to mind anytime the subject of healing comes up to me, I guess. I haven't studied her in depth, but there was a lady who used to go around conducting healing services called Catherine Coleman.
Yes.
That the one quote I remember reading from her once, something to the effect of, I don't know why God doesn't heal everyone, but I'm very afraid of those who say they do.
Yeah. It's the same old problem. Look at Job. You know, there's this argument between two certain celestial beings over whether or not Job is a proper person, and whether or not it has to do with the fact that he has everything and has a wonderful life, or whether that's that inner conviction that can't be shaken.
Mm-hmm.
And he loses everything horribly. And what's the first thing that everybody says? What have you done, Job? God has destroyed you and your life. You must have done something disgusting and awful. No, he happened to be a convenient example
Mm-hmm.
of the fact that things happen to people for no other reason than they happened. And what makes it reasonable or not reasonable is taking what happens to you and using it. If you are in an accident and you take a long time recovering, maybe before the accident you were not a very patient person.
Mm.
Maybe when things got in your way, you got frustrated, you lost your temper, and having to force yourself step by step back to health, and knowing that patience is the only thing that's going to get you there. You learn.
And it
when
is
you
a very
have it.
fair question, or a very valid question, I think, that if someone has been healed after specifically asking God to be healed, whether that was just coincidental, that it was the appropriate time anyway, but it's not so much that they were healed because of a request as that somehow the purpose of whatever the ailment was had been fulfilled. And it's
Who knows?
6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
And you can make arguments for both things both ways.
Yeah,
Somebody
very
prays
solid
to
arguments
God,
both
yeah.
ways.
Somebody prays to God to be healed, and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody sort of says, "Oh, God, I wish I were better," and it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which is God's answer? Are they both? Is neither? Are they coincidental? What's going on here? We all have to make our own reasons for that, and to allow somebody else.
And that might be the better key to it anyway, that whatever answer you get is God's answer to you.
Mhm.
And God's answer to you
Is
should not,
nobody else's business.
is nobody else's business, should not be expected to be God's answer to anyone else.
Yeah. Okay, here's a very close personal example.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest sister died of colon cancer. It was not good. It was discovered far too late. It was mistreated. Okay, these are all reasons for all of us, not
Mhm.
just herself, but for all of us in the family, to be furious. And a really good reason for all of us to want the inevitable to not happen,
Mm-hmm.
for her to be healed somehow.
We always like to believe those we love are immortal.
Or at least that they hold a special enough place that special things can happen for
Mhm.
them. It didn't happen. She died. What bothers me still are the numbers of people who said she was not healed because of her beliefs, or her lack of belief, or her misinformed belief. She died because she died. She had cancer because she had cancer. All of the reasons that we have for thinking about these things in certain ways are our own reasons. My way of looking at her death probably has very little to do with the way she felt about her death.
Mm-hmm.
We had a long discussion about it one time because it was the first time she told me that she had it. And they knew it was advanced. They knew she had very little time left. And I was very upset. And I told her, if this were happening to me, I don't know how I would deal. That sort of thing I can't deal with it. I just don't want to deal with it. Other people having it, I can deal with them. I can give them what they need.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to have something like that, I don't think I could.
But in the end, it would not be a loving thing to stand where someone should be standing themselves.
Yeah.
So-
But I think that's the word that you always need to remember when dealing with anybody. And that is what you're doing in dealing with them, is it a loving thing to do? And to go to somebody and accuse them of bad faith, lack of faith, or whatever it might be,
Mm-hmm.
and that being the cause of their illness, their death, their accidents, their difficult lives, is a total disservice to both of you.
It's
The
certainly
person-
not loving.
The person who's dealing with a difficult life does not need the extra guilt of possibly having something wrong with them. And you don't need to do it to them.
And sometimes I think the most loving thing you can say to someone is simply, I don't know, but I still care.
And I'll help if I can.
And I'll be here if nothing else. Even
Mhm.
even if we're both sitting here in confusion, at least you won't be here alone.
Yeah. But at
at any
least you
rate,
have somebody else with whom you can maybe bounce ideas until something does come clear. Or a way
and for most of us, we're just kind of muddling our way through anyway, and
Sure.
figuring out what the next step is, one step at a time.
There's only room for so many great people in the world, and the rest of us have to sort of deal with the day-to-day.
Well, or we choose to become great in our own little circles, rather than somebody else's.
Some people are born great. Some people achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. No, that's not the Bible, that's Shakespeare.
No, I didn't think it was the Bible. I guess my conclusion, or what I encourage people, is to look in the mirror and to say, yeah, God pronounced it good, and I will too.
Mm-hmm. Or even if he didn't, I'll deal. I mean,
I think he did.
the whole
Anyway,
world.
I do thank you for joining us this evening, and been a wonderful little discussion here. Hope to have you back again sometime between your anthropological excursions into theology and history and what have you. So,
Well, we do have that other one promised one of these days soon.
yes, and I look forward to it. The discussion to be. Thank you.
You're welcome.